Okay, when we think of oil, we usually think of fuel, right? It's the stuff that powers our cars, heats our homes, the engine of the modern world. But what if that black gold is also fueling something much darker? What if it's the secret ingredient for war? Today, we're diving into this hidden curse, how the world's most valuable resource could actually be poisoning everything, from our politics to our economies and even our deepest beliefs.
Just listen to this quote. "The oil poisons you and us." I mean, wow. That was said by a Kurdish official back in 2015, not in some political debate, but in a refugee camp, right in the middle of a war that was literally being funded by smuggled oil. It's an incredibly powerful claim coming right from the heart of the crisis. But it makes you wonder, right? How could that possibly be true?
And now right there, that's the big question we're tackling in this explainer. How can the world's most valuable, most sought-after resource actually be a poison? We're going to unpack this whole idea of the curse of oil by breaking it down into three distinct but totally interconnected poisons that seem to flow right from the wells. So, let's get into it. All right, first up, the politics of dependency. This is our first poison, and it all starts with how a flood of oil money can completely short-circuit the relationship between a government and its own people. It creates this thing that political scientists have a name for, a rentier state. So what is a rentier state? Put simply, it's a country that lives off rent it collects from outsiders. In this case, by selling oil, instead of living off taxes from its own citizens. It basically doesn't need its people's money to pay the bills. And as you can imagine, this completely flips the entire script on how a country is run. Think about it like this. In a normal taxpayer state, let's say a democracy, the money flows from the bottom up. You pay taxes to the government. That gives you leverage, right? It's the whole historical cry of no taxation without representation. You demand a say. But in a rentier state, the money flows from the top down. The ruler gets billions from oil and then hands some of it out. The deal changes from representation for your taxes to something more like no representation, but hey, here's some free stuff and cheap gas. People stop being citizens with rights and become dependent subjects. Okay, so that political poison leads us right into the second one. And this one sounds like a total contradiction. It's the paradox of poverty. We're talking about how countries that are sitting on unbelievable natural wealth often end up with, you guessed it, struggling economies and a whole lot of hardship for their people. And yeah, there's a name for this too, the resource curse. It's this bizarre phenomenon where being rich in things like oil is actually linked to less economic growth and worse development. It's just so counterintuitive. I mean, how on earth does having something everyone wants end up making your country poorer? Well, it turns out there are a few ways this curse works its magic. First, you get this thing called Dutch disease. Basically, all the money pouring in from oil sales makes your country's currency super strong. That sounds great, but it actually makes everything else you produce, like farm goods or manufactured products, way too expensive for anyone else to buy. So those industries just wither and die. Then you get a brain drain. All your smartest, most talented people, they all rush to the oil sector because that's where the money is. And since wealth now comes from who you know, not what you create, corruption just spirals. The end game? A hollowed-out economy that depends on one thing and often a totally ruined environment. And look, this isn't just some abstract economic theory. The human cost is just staggering. Take the story of Ken Saro-Wiwa in Nigeria. He was an activist who saw his people, the Ogoni, getting absolutely nothing but poverty and pollution from the billions of dollars of oil being pumped out from under their feet. So he protested. And for that, the rentier state, the regime, executed him. It's a truly tragic and powerful example of the curse in action. So you've got this political system built on dependency and an economy hollowed out by a curse. You can see how that creates a powder keg, right? And that brings us to our third, and maybe the most volatile poison of them all, the unholy alliance of oil, God, and terror. So here's how this unholy alliance works, step by step. First, if your ruler and your power doesn't come from a democratic vote, you need some other justification to rule. You need legitimacy. So what do? You find a specific religious faction and you pour oil money into it. A lot of oil money. In return, that religious group gives you their blessing, telling everyone your power is basically God-given. This new state-sponsored religion then becomes a tool to crush anyone who disagrees, any other religious view, any secular view, they're all suppressed. And the final, scary step? This intolerant ideology, now supercharged with oil money, gets exported all over the world. And if you want a really chilling, modern example of this, look at Raif Badawi in Saudi Arabia. This guy wasn't a terrorist, he wasn't violent. All he did was start a website for liberal political discussion. He wanted a space for open debate. And for that crime, for daring to challenge the state-sponsored religious narrative, the regime sentenced him to 1,000 lashes and a decade in prison, just for starting a blog.
And here's the crazy thing. This system plants the seeds of its own instability. The kind of fundamentalism these regimes often promote encourages high birth rates, so you get what's called a youth bulge. A huge chunk of the population is young, between 15 and 29. But remember that resource curse economy? It offers them 0 jobs, 0 opportunities. So you have a massive group of frustrated, unemployed young men. It's a well-known recipe for social unrest, for violence, and a perfect recruiting pool for extremist groups.
So let's connect the dots. We've got these 3 poisons, right? A political system based on dependency, an economy crippled by a curse, and a society made volatile by this blend of fundamentalism and a youth bulge. It all sounds like a pretty convincing theory, but is that all it is? Does it actually hold up in the real world? Well, let's look at the evidence. If this whole curse of oils thing is real, we should be able to see a pretty clear pattern when we look at the world's biggest oil exporters. Let's see if we do. Okay, just look at this list of the top 10 oil exporters from a few years back. Let's just read them off. Saudi Arabia, an absolute monarchy. Russia, an authoritarian oligarchy. Nigeria, unstable, conflict-ridden. Iraq, state failure. UAE, Kuwait, monarchies. Venezuela, authoritarian, collapsed economy. Angola, a dictatorship. Mexico, high conflict. Out of the top 10, how many are stable democracies? 1. Just 1, Canada. And even Canada is kind of the exception that proves the rule. Because its oil is from tar sands, it's super expensive to get, so it never created that flood of easy, free money that corrupts everything else. I mean, the pattern is pretty hard to ignore. I know, that's a pretty bleak picture. But it is not hopeless. If the problem is our global dependency on this cursed resource, well, then the solution has to be breaking free from it. So how do we do that? How do we break these golden chains?
You know, for decades, the big fear was peak oil. The idea that we were going to run out of oil and it would lead to catastrophic wars over the last few drops. But there's a new idea, a more hopeful one, the carbon bubble. The thinking here is completely different. It's that we, the world, will choose to transition to renewables before the oil runs out, leaving all those trillions of dollars of fossil fuels in the ground as worthless, stranded assets. The source of these regimes' power, both literally and financially, would just evaporate. And that is a future we can actively choose to create.
So what's the antidote? How do we get there? Well, the path forward is kind of like a global detox program. It means getting serious about energy efficiency. It means a huge, rapid shift to renewable energy. And on a personal level, it means rethinking our own consumption. And the cool thing is, this isn't just one person's idea. Thinkers from all over, from scientists to religious leaders like Pope Francis, have pointed out that small changes, when multiplied by millions and millions of people, can make a massive difference. Every one of those choices helps turn off the money tap that feeds these cursed systems.
And all of this leads to a final, really provocative question. What if the most effective way to fight dictatorship and terror isn't actually with armies and drones, but with solar panels and wind turbines? If our collective demand for oil is what fuels these conflicts and props up these regimes, that isn't choosing how we power our world the ultimate act of peacemaking, it kind of reframes the whole issue, doesn't it? It suggests that our energy choice isn't just an environmental one. It might be one of the most important geopolitical and moral choices we can make.